All right, so today I want to talk about this tweet from Zuby Music. And he says, when people say educate yourself, they normally mean drink the Kool-Aid. Now, it's a very good way that he put it, and that I've kind of thought about that, but haven't completely thought about it in that way. And it's a very good way of putting it, in that when people say educate yourself, they don't actually mean go look into the data more yourself. At least most of these people. Some people do, but they don't mean go look into the data. Find opinions that don't agree with your own. Again, what they really mean is go read the party line. Basically, it's basically saying, yeah, tote the party line. And that's the thing when it comes to all this kind of stuff. And the reality is that regardless of which side is right on a lot of this kind of stuff, oftentimes, I mean, you take climate change, you take gun control, you take a lot of these issues. There's one distinct side that is constantly completely unaware of what the other side believe, not what the other side believes, but why they believe it. Like the pro gun control crowd could not make a coherent argument for a gun or against gun control. They have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to that because they're in such a bubble. Again, the anti-gun control crowd can oftentimes do a very good job of arguing for gun control because they're actually educated. They actually do research that would reinforce that they don't just have confirmation bias. The reality is, again, it's the same stuff with climate change too. Is that the people who believe in climate change, um, they've never done the research. They've never read the research. They just blindly believe what people are telling them. And the reason why they can't make a coherent argument is that they've never actually looked into things for themselves. And if they have, they've done it for a very incredibly small amount of time. And like I say, the reality is too is that because they're just blindly believing what other people think, they can't have a debate because their opinions are just what other people think. They've never actually looked into the data themselves, and if they do look into the data, it's oftentimes the bias data, the bought and paid for data. Now again, like I say too, they constantly make the argument when it comes to climate change of, oh, it's just paid off by the oil companies, the anti-climate change crowd, when they've never actually provided any evidence of that. But on the flip side, every single climate scientist, at least most of them, are paid based off climate change being a thing. Because if climate change was completely disproven, let's just say that someone magically completely disproved it overnight, well, most of these climate scientists would be out of a job. So again, the reality is too, it's like the left too, and that my hypothesis too is that most of the left's beliefs are tend to be just projections of their own worldview, right? Like they accuse the anti-climate change people, oh, the all everything is just it's just paid off by big oil, when again they never actually provide an example of that. And the reality is too is that their research is entirely um, paid off as well, and if anything, it's paid off more too. Like, I mean, you look at some of these climate change people. Look at how much money they're making. We look at Al Gore. The guy's making 250, 500 grand a speech. Not to mention too, you look at all these other people that have enriched themselves too. And this is exactly what Michael Moore pointed out in his film, which I think was a decent film. I mean, I think it was still a little too pro climate change. But the one thing that he pointed out that there's no debate on too is that there's a lot of people who are in the climate change field and in the renewable energy field that are abusing it because there's such a lucrative market that largely shouldn't exist, right? So there's people that are exploiting that market and are making a lot of money off it. So of course, again, people that may pretend like there's this massive, financial push to not go away from oil and gas, it's largely BS. Simply for the reason that number one, a lot of these big, I mean, and look at the car companies too. Like if they wanted to make electric cars, they could do it. The reality, I mean, most of these manufacturers already have electric cars. They already have hybrids. The reality is that oil and gas is still far superior, which is why oil and gas has so much more. There's so much more. The reality isn't there's no. I mean, there's always a little bit, but there's no massive um, financial incentive for them not to do it, because if there was a financial incentive, like if green energy truly was 100% the future and it truly was going to be better, these big car manufacturers would be moving towards that, but they're not. And one of the main reasons that they are even moving towards it to a small degree is because there's so much political pressure on them, and there's regulations and all that garbage. But getting back to the main point here, when they say educate yourself, they more normally mean drink the Kool-Aid. In that, again, leftism is a collectivist mentality. Again, it's not an individualist mentality, and the reason why the left tends to do that kind of stuff is, again, they're collectivists, which means they actively believe in thinking for yourself to be a bad thing, because because they're collectivists. Again, it's not that complicated. I really don't like when people complicate these topics. Now, again, there's always some nuance, but there isn't as much as what people make it out to be in most of these cases. Not every case, but in most of these cases. Um, Again, because leftists tend to be, I mean, they're almost always collectivists, and that they're collectivists, they're not individualists. And then people on the right are almost always individualists, which is, again, why so many people, regardless of whether or not, I'm not even saying one side's better or not. I mean, definitely I believe individualism is better, but again, just for sake of argument, the left doesn't value um, thinking for yourself, because thinking for yourself is an individualist thing, which is why you constantly see all these leftist ideas that it's promoted by some of these higher ups, and then all the people at the bottom eat it up like sheep. Again, so that's one of the many problems. But again, it's a very good way of putting it. I mean, I put it in kind of similar ways to this, but the way, again, he puts it, when they say educate yourself, they normally mean drink the Kool-Aid. Again, it's exactly what I said. They don't mean go read up on this kind of stuff yourself. They just mean tote the party line. And again, I've never heard someone tell me directly, yeah, you should go read up on this more yourself. They always mean, oh, climate denier and all that garbage. Again, they never come up with an actual argument. And that's exactly the way that you can tell that they're just being disingenuous, because if they weren't, they would be perfectly fine with people being exposed to beliefs that differ from theirs. Again, that is another reason why I think the left is 100% wrong, 100% immoral, and should never be, not taken seriously. But a better way of putting it would be not given any legitimacy. And now, again, the right isn't perfect. There's plenty of criticism, especially the mainstream right. But again, the problem with the left too is that if they actually were right about things, they would be perfectly fine with people being exposed to views that differ from their own. And it's something that I've talked about multiple times before, that, again, people on the left are a lot more likely to not expose themselves to news and to beliefs and to any political talk in any way, shape, or form, um, that differ from their own. People on the right are a lot more likely to expose themselves to stuff that differs from their own. Now, again, part of that reason is, again, people a lot of times are just flat out forced to. I mean, you're at an airport, or you're at anywhere that's got a TV on in a coffee shop or a restaurant, or a lot of times, like, yeah, you're forced to watch CBC, or you're forced to watch CNN. I mean, you can ask them to change the channel, but chances are some zombie sheep is going to come by, later that day and ask them to put it back on. So again, that's part of it. Again, part of it too is that I think people on the right too are a lot better in that they're constantly exposed to people that differ from their own in public schools and in universities. So they become very good at debate and for rationalizing their thoughts. And because leftists aren't exposed, part of it not because of their own good doing or bad doing, part of it is just how the world is working right now, unfortunately. They're just not exposed to beliefs that differ from their own as much naturally. Now, again, you've even had too. I believe Jack Dorsey, when he I know Tim Pool always talks about this, when he went on Joe Rogan, they talked about it that Jack Dorsey, who is a pretty lefty guy, literally admitted, yeah, people on the right are a lot more likely to follow people that disagree with them than people on the left. So again, I'm not saying again that one side's right or wrong. The reality is too is that the side that's more, if I was an alien, had no idea about our culture and our history or anything, um, if they had to tell me, okay, which side do you think is right on this, I would go look at the side that exposes themselves to beliefs that differ from their own more. Because again, I mean, you look at religions too. That's why a lot of the religions are kind of like cults. Now, again, Christianity is probably the least culty because they're the least fundamentalist, at least compared to the Islams of the world. Again, this is the same reason why religious people tend to not expose themselves to beliefs that differ from their own very often. It's the same thing with literal cults. Again, because if you expose yourselves to beliefs that differ from your own, you'll more likely to realize that your beliefs are crazy. And again, it's the same thing with the left. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you liked the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. Again, appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And last few things, check me out on Parlay, Twitter, and BitChute. All those links are in the description. Make sure you follow me on those other platforms as well if you haven't already.